So I just got back from seeing Spider-Man Brand New Day, a movie that I have been looking forward to for a while, and I'm really happy to say that I really enjoyed it. In fact, I enjoyed all of the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. And if you are someone who enjoyed the previous three Holland movies, you will probably enjoy this. But if you didn't, I don't think this movie does a whole lot to sway you. And being in the MCU, this of course means that this is not a core solo only Spider-Man adventure. The MCU loves its cameos, loves its crossovers, and you get that here. With a small amount of overall universe building teasers. Just a little. It's definitely been more heavy-handed in the past with previous MCU movies, so I'm glad it wasn't too forceful in the way it approached that, but there are definitely a couple things that do set things up in the future that may not necessarily be Spider-Man related, but I don't think that detracts from the overall experience. One thing I definitely love is that this movie throws some surprises at us that I didn't see coming and that weren't spoiled in the trailer. And in the day and age of trailers giving away way too many things, that was nice to see. Heading into this movie, the aspect that I was looking forward to the most was the Punisher. Jon Bernthal returns, and I love Jon Bernthal's Punisher. We've had lots of great Punishers in the past. I've got to say, he is my favourite. But the most interesting aspect was how they brought him in, how they integrated his version. Because his version in the Daredevil show and the Punisher show, and most recently seen in Punisher One Last Kill, is a very R-rated, very trigger-happy, very bloody, very violent, heavy Punisher. And I love that in those appearances. So what I was really intrigued by was how they're going to take that and put it into a family-friendly Spider-Man movie without it feeling like it left part of the character at the door. And I think they did a pretty good job at keeping it faithful to the overall story of the Punisher, because after all, this isn't a Punisher movie, so they don't really need to dive too deep into that stuff. But there is a moment where a character sees some pictures of who she assumes is Frank's family. I think it was on a fridge door, not that it matters. And she asks, like, who are they? Are these your family? And Frank shuts that question down very quickly. We obviously know why, so the movie alludes to that, and anyone who's not seen Punisher before, they may decide to check out the show, to check out Daredevil, or the older movies, and they will understand why he shut that down. And I'm glad that the movie didn't go too far into reminding us who he was and why he does what he does, but they did at least allude to it, which I think was the smarter choice. Now, we don't get the uber-violent Punisher that we got in the previous versions. That being said, Punisher in Brand New Day, his answer to things is shoot first, ask questions later. He definitely has a preferred way of doing things. And Spider-Man's job is usually to shut that down and resolve it in a different way. But ultimately, I think the reason why Punisher works so well in this movie is the dynamic that Jon Bernthal has with Tom Holland. Obviously, they are friends in real life, they've worked together on several other projects, as recently as The Odyssey, and in this movie, watching these two characters talk, watching them interact, they bicker like crazy, and it is so entertaining. It is so much fun. And they get the balance right with this character. They don't do too much Punisher in this movie because, after all, this is a Spider-Man movie, it's not a Spider-Man / Punisher movie. So they definitely get that balance right. We get just enough of him, but not so much that it becomes a buddy cop duo type movie. Now, they do have jokes between them, but that is usually down to Spider-Man's, quippy nature and Frank's very defensive tone. Especially one running joke where it's Spider-Man saved Punisher from something on Staten Island, and Punisher's stance is, oh, you didn't save me, I had that down, and they keep this joke going throughout the movie, and it's a decent joke. They play it off very well, and it kind of reminds me of the Hawkeye, Black Widow, Budapest thing that they had going on in the earlier Avengers movies. So to sum up talking about the Punisher, I'm glad they included him in this movie, but I'm glad they didn't go too far with him, and I was okay with them toning down the violence, And his language as well, although there are times that he will go to swear and he will just get his mouth webbed up. I mean, that happened once in the trailer, and I think that's the only time it happens in the movie. But it is a funny joke, it does work, and actually, they do expand on that scene in the movie rather than just what we see in the trailer. It's where he has the grenade launcher and Spider-Man like shoots a bit of web into the end of it. In the movie, it plays out a little bit different with Spider-Man like yanking the first one out and then sticking it to the top of the van. And then Frank just, okay, pulls out his second grenade launcher, and that's the one that gets webbed in at the end. And there's those moments that just capture who the Punisher is. He just has a arsenal. He's a walking arsenal of weaponry. And that is something that they really do well with that particular like iteration of the Punisher.
Mother.
Go home! Another big marketing push was the reveal of the return of the Hulk for Spider-Man Brand New Day, and it was a lot of fun having Bruce Banner back, of course played again by Mark Ruffalo, who, I'll just say, like, in the MCU, the world of the Avengers, I really like Mark Ruffalo. I am dying for a proper Hulk movie with him. Like, please, just give us a modern-day Hulk movie. We haven't had one since 2008, come on. I mean, the closest we've got was, Thor Ragnarok, that was it, that was the one, and I really liked that movie, and I'd love them to do a proper Hulk movie. They keep dancing around it by having him as a side character in another movie, but please, just give us a goddamn Hulk movie. There's enough there, you can do it. I promise you, you've even kind of proven that you can do it by having him as such a fun side character. He would work as the main. He definitely would. So it was a lot of fun having him back, especially having Savage Hulk back, which we've not seen in quite a while. Which brings me on to my next kind of, not quite rant, but semi-rant, and that is the inconsistency of the Hulk in the MCU in recent years. I'd say since Infinity War, which is that they just don't seem to know what they want to do with him. Because in Thor Ragnarok, I think they got that dynamic between Bruce Banner and Savage Hulk. Like, they actually gave him a personality in that one, but he was still like the ripping shirt off and just like, you know, fighting monsters Hulk that we all know and love. But he had dialogue, he had more of a character, a personality, and was kind of comedic. I quite like Ragnarok. But since then, in Infinity War, he refused to come out. It looked like he was scared, but that's not what the Russos said it was, even though that is definitely what it looks like. Then in Endgame, they gave us Smart Hulk, which personally I didn't like. I think they just kind of merged the worst aspects of it, and we just had a character that was like, meh, yeah, okay. I didn't like that. I watched a little bit of She-Hulk. They just did more Smart Hulk again, except he had the inhibitor thing on his wrist that stops him fully transforming. And in this movie, he has that thing again. He's back as full Bruce Banner, and if he takes that off, then he turns into him. So I don't know where the whole Smart Hulk thing went, but maybe it was just that unpopular and just a lot of people called it out for not working, that they just walked that back. Or maybe it was just a Gamma thing that just wore off and, I don't know, Hulk evolved again. I have no idea. The MCU has been very, very bad at explaining what's been going on with the Hulk. So I think all we can do in this movie is just accept where it is and try and enjoy it for what it is. Because it is very enjoyable. And that brings me on to the Savage Hulk fight versus Spider-Man. I've got to be honest, I liked what they did, but I was expecting a bit more. Especially because it wasn't long ago that we saw, was it Captain America Brave New Day? Something like that. It had a similar title, Captain America 4. And we got the new Captain America versus Red Hulk, which was basically Savage Hulk again. And, you know, I've seen that movie a couple times, and they did a pretty good job at the fight. Whether you think it was plausible or not, it was very entertaining. It looked good. Now, this is obviously not a guy in a winged Captain America costume that doesn't have any powers. This is Spider-Man versus the Hulk, so I was expecting a little bit more than that. And like I say, it was decent, but I wanted a bit more from it. A common criticism about the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies is that each one of them feels like a Spider-Man coming-of-age movie. In Homecoming, it made sense because it was the first one. He was just learning how to be Spider-Man. Tony Stark didn't want him to, go out there properly on his own and take on people like the Vulture. That was the one in that one. I almost forgot. I thought it was Scorpion for a moment. That's this one, kind of. More on that later. So it made sense being a coming of age story in that one. And by the end of it, he rejected becoming an Avenger because he wanted to be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And it felt like he accepted who he was and what he wanted to do. And then in Far From Home, it became a coming of age story again because he was dealing with the death of Tony Stark. He was like everyone was talking about him being like, are you leading the Avengers now? And like he didn't really know what he wanted to do. And by the end of it, he came to terms with all of that. And again, the revelation was he just wants to be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Then comes the third movie, No Way Home, and again, because of how this movie ends with the unit of the world, like forgetting who Peter Parker is, he's starting over, and the end of it is like it's ditching like all the technology, the fancy AIs, and like you see the sewing. The costume by the sewing machine. He's making his own suits now. He's not having some fancy Jarvis level tech thing make them. So it felt very like old school Spider-Man the way No Way Home ended. And we finally got the line, admittedly from someone different than Uncle Ben, of great power, where there is great power, there comes great responsibility. So that also felt like he's truly realizing how to become Spider-Man, how to be Spider-Man at the end of the third one. And this one, but first of all, actually, this one brings back all the technology. Like he has the AI, he has the machine that makes the suits for him. Never explains how he has those things. And this isn't a Spider-Man that's completely broke and trying to make rent. They never really go into that. But I did feel like they walked backwards from that classic Spider-Man ending of the end of No Way Home to the start of this one where he has all this like fancy gear again. But that's not the direction they wanted to go with it, so that's fine. But back to what I was saying about it being a coming of age story, because a big part of this movie is Spider, and it kind of blends itself in actually with the ending to No Way Home and everyone forgetting who Peter was, and he was trying to figure out how he can be Spider-Man and how he can be Peter Parker and which one he wants to be, like throughout the entirety of this movie. The revelation being that he can be both of them and that he knows how to be Spider-Man again. So again, it becomes a coming of age story, and they tie this plot of this like evolution. Again, something that the trailer revealed, which teased something else that they didn't quite deliver on, in my opinion, which I'll get into again in a moment. But this like coming of age thing, it's like, can we just stop doing it now? We've had 4 Spider-Man coming of age stories. Surely he knows how to be Spider-Man. He doesn't have to keep learning how to be Spider-Man and kind of having a mentor along the way. In the first one, it was Tony Stark. Then it was Nick Fury. Then it was Doctor Strange, and in this one, it's the Punisher. A little bit of Bruce Banner in there as well. A bit of advice along the way, advice that he didn't know he was giving, but he was giving. And I'm just kind of, I'm not that annoyed by it. It's not that off-putting, but it is kind of, can they stop doing it? Have they forgotten how to give a Spider-Man movie without him having to figure out how to be Spider-Man in it? It's like every movie is like 1 step forwards and then 2 steps back. Okay, so one thing I wasn't that impressed by was something they teased in the trailer, which was the next step of Spider-Man's like evolution and his eyes going black, and he was going to lose control, and they were maybe going to pitch him as like a villainous, and you had that line from the Punisher of just like, you're losing it, kid. And it might have had this moment of Spider-Man going dark side and the Punisher having to bring him back. They tease that, they do a little bit of that, but they don't go all out. What I thought they were going to do when I saw the trailer was Man Spider, which is, if you don't know, was where the arachnid part of him fully takes over. He actually transforms and becomes more spider-like and goes full on, you know, animalistic. I didn't think they were going to do like a full like Wolfman type, like transformation in this one. But I thought they were going to do a bit more than just have him being a little heavy-handed, maybe almost injuring someone a bit too much. And maybe that's because they want to do the symbiote Spidey stuff in the future, which I'm sure they will, because I think we're going to get a few more Tom Holland Spider-Man movies before they eventually, hopefully, introduce Miles Morales, which is something that I know Holland is very keen to do. So maybe they didn't want to go full on with that because they are saving that for symbiote, like black symbiote suit, Venom. But I don't know, it's just including the like teaser that Spider-Man might be going a little bit dark side, a little bit man-spidery, and then ultimately not going that far with it. And the line about you losing it, kid, was alluding to that, but in a very like kind of like watered down kind of way. So that would be like another criticism of mine, but it kind of like plays into the coming of age story. Like the evolution is definitely tied to that, of like Spider-Man like realizing who he is, and he has to accept himself in order to move on, which is something that he does in every single movie. But I've gone on about that already. It's just the like DNA evolution ties into it. It also does tie into how they introduce Bruce Banner into this movie, which was a nice little segue to get him in there and to get the Hulk in there as well. And there were some good parallels between, trying to contain the arachnid within and Bruce Banner trying to contain the, giant green rage monster within. So, it does have some benefits to it, but I think they could have done a little bit more with that. Like, imagine if they'd have, like, just going completely crazy. Imagine if they'd have gone full on, like, arachnid transformation and he becomes this, like, monster, and that's what fights Savage Hulk. That would have been awesome. That would have been such a crowd-pleasing thing. And I think it would have been distant enough from the symbiote Spider-Man, because in that he's still Spider-Man, just a much darker, heavy-hitting version of him. So I think like a full-on transformation could have still worked, but ultimately, I don't know, maybe they were playing it a little bit safe. It kind of came off that way, but it's not what they were doing. It's not what we got in the end. And I personally think that's a shame. I think it's a shame because I think they could have gone further with it, and I think it would have been a payoff. It would have been a risk, but I think there could have been a good payoff with that. But what I will say is just what they gave us was still decent. It just could have been more. So I mentioned the ending to No Way Home in that everyone forgot who Peter Parker was. So that meant that MJ and Ned no longer knew that they were best friends with him, that they were partners with him. And this movie does, of course, deal with that. It does address that. Now, I'm not going to spoil it and say how they address it, but what I will say is they address it in the most obvious way. Like, you probably already know before you watch this exactly what they're going to do with this. Now, does that mean it's bad? Not at all. It's well acted. There are some emotional scenes and moments between Tom Holland and Zendaya, and some fun moments with Peter's, technically former best friend Ned. So they do have good scenes, but they're predictable scenes. And I suppose at the end of the day, it's up to you whether that's, something that's going to pull you in or not. What I will say is it's something that I hope they don't keep talking about in future Spider-Man movies. Like, maybe mention it, but don't make it a core theme between the characters. So there are two sets of villains that the trailers perhaps did make us think were bigger parts of this movie than they actually turn out to be. One of them is the Hand. Now, maybe it's not the trailer's fault, but I think they knew what they were doing. The Hand isn't that big of a presence in this movie. They are essentially just muscle. And one thing that I did find funny was that in the trailer, there's this scene where Spider Man is leaping towards the hand and the hand are coming down that way. And people are like, oh, well, that's where Daredevil's going to be. That's where the Punisher's going to be. That's where maybe the other Spider Men are going to be. And it was kind of built up by the fans. But like I say, they knew what they were doing when they teased that in the trailer. And they built it up so much, and it looks like the hand is going to be one of the big threats in this movie. That particular clip, that scene was part of a montage at the start of the movie. I find that really funny because it was built up to be, admittedly by the community, to be so much more than it turns out it actually was. And I didn't mind that. Like I say, I find it kind of funny, to be honest. The hand themselves, I thought they were going to be a bit more. I thought they were going to have a much bigger presence in this. But like I say, turns out they really weren't. We got a really cool action scene with them in the movie, so I'll admit that. But I thought they were going to have actual story arcs. Pivotal to the plot is what I mean, not story arcs. But yeah, it turns out they were kind of just muscle for the person who was really behind all of this. The other villain that this movie teased in the trailer was Scorpion. And I thought he was good in this, and I'm glad we finally get to see him since we saw him in the post-credit scene of Homecoming, and we've seen nothing of him since. And Scorpion is a cool Spider-Man villain, so I'm glad we got to see him. But again, just like the Hand, we don't get to see that much of him. He's in a few. We get a couple good scenes, where he fights Spider-Man. Oh well, one really, to be honest. But there is another one where it teases the fight, and then they do the fight later on. And it was fun, but again, I thought Scorpion and the Hand were going to have a much bigger role in this movie. Turns out Scorpion also has a fairly small role. And again, that's fine because what they do as the bigger overall villain, the overall story, they don't tell you that in the trailer, which I love. So there's really two ways of looking at that. The way they treat those villains is, on one hand, you may be really looking forward to a Scorpion movie, a movie about the Hand, and you think these are going to be really big players, and the story's going to revolve around them. And then you're let down by the fact that they're not in it as much as you would like. But on the other hand, they throw them in the trailer, and they are in the movie to a meaningful degree. They're not just cameos by any means. They do have a meaningful presence, just not as much as you would think. But then they use that for the trailer to kind of build it up, and then they kind of throw in some completely unknown plot. And I kind of prefer that because I'm very firmly in the camp of trailers give away too much, at least a lot of them. And I've probably mentioned it quite a few times in the past, and I know a lot of other people have. My number one example of trailers that give away far too much is Batman v Superman. Why did they say that Doomsday was in that? Was Batman v Superman not enough? Was that not a big enough marketing push? Anyway, we're not going to talk about Batman v Superman that much. It's just an example of, a trailer that just reveals way too much. Other Marvel movies have done the same thing. I'm just glad that this one makes you think what it is kind of about, but doesn't really tell you everything. And there's a lot of unknowns. And that's stuff to look forward to. But as I say, you could feel a bit shortchanged when it comes to the Hand and when it comes to Scorpion. But what they do give us is still some high quality fight scenes with them. And perhaps that's enough. I don't know too much about the Hand or the Scorpion. All I know is what I've seen in Daredevil, and with Scorpion, what I've seen in the kind of the Spider-Man games, because the games are kind of the only thing I remember doing anything with him apart from the animated show when I was a kid. So I don't know enough about the story of Matt Gargan, I think it is, to say whether he could lead a full 2-hour big budget Hollywood movie. So I'm kind of happy. I'm content with what they did, but I can see why some people perhaps wouldn't be. Okay, on to some aspects that are undoubtedly, undisputably good. Then it's not a, it was good, but it could have done this. And that is the visuals of the movie. First of all, like the action, oh, so good. I love that they looked, and they actually came out and said this, they looked at the Insomniac games, and they are fantastic, by the way. At least like the combat in them. I know the stories, the second one can have a few issues, but um the the action scenes, they looked at what those games do so well with how Spider-Man fights and how he moves, and they incorporate that into this movie, and I absolutely loved that. The other thing is the suit. It is probably maybe not my favorite Spider-Man suit, but it's up there. It looks amazing, and what I love is that they cherry picked details from the like previous two Spider-Man, which makes sense because, and I think Tom Holland spoke about this in the marketing, that his Peter Parker met those Spider-Men, so he's seen those suits. So when he's designing his new one, he cherry picks details and kind of puts it together, and the whole thing is like a homage, but it makes sense in universe as well. And I really like that. And even if he never, they No Way Home never happened and they never met, I would still like the nod towards the little suit designs that they cherry picked, and it was very nice. It was a very good suit. One of the coolest things about Spider-Man is the way he travels around, and the web swinging is something that I like. Let's go back to the Tobey Maguire ones, the Sam Raimi films. The web swinging in those, very dated technology by modern standards. It was like the early 2000s, so the web swinging wasn't particularly that good, but it's forgivable because of the time that came out in. Then you had the Garfield movies. They, to me, are the gold standard of watching him running around rooftops, bouncing off of walls of buildings, and the pure acrobatics, the parkour, the web swinging. All of that was the best. That, to me, like remains the gold standard. Then came the Tom Holland ones, and in the first three, the web swinging is okay. Like the way he moves is okay. It still looks good. The effects are good. The CGI is good. And obviously, Tom Holland is probably the most athletic person that's ever played Spider Man. So, perfect casting in that respect. But I always had a thing with the way Spider Man moved. Like, it just wasn't as good as Amazing Spider Man. Which is a shame. Like I said, the Tobey Maguire ones you can forgive because of the times they were made in. But like, I mean, the MCU ones, they came after the Garfield ones, so you can't, forgive them for the same reasons. Like I say, they didn't look awful, but they just didn't look as like punchy, as impactful, as I suppose vivid, maybe vibrant as well, as energetic perhaps. Now, this movie, I think, does a lot to correct that. Much like the combat, they looked at the Insomniac games. I think this one looked at previous movies, it looked at the games as well, and it incorporated the movement to the web swinging, the parkour, the way he just travels around the city. And in this one, I think they improved it a lot. I would still say The Amazing Spider-Man did a better job, but I'm really happy with what they did in this movie, and I'm not entirely unhappy with what they did in the first three. They still look good. What we had before was amazing, then we had good. So it's like, but now we've gone from good to great. Perhaps still not amazing, but still great. And the other thing, and I think this is one where this movie nailed it probably more than any other ones, was New York City. The shots of New York are just beautiful in this movie. And that goes with, modern day cameras and the cinematography techniques. It does play into the web swinging as well, because a lot of the times when we're seeing the high up shots of the city, we're seeing them while he's swinging around, and it just looks gorgeous in this movie. It really does. And I didn't even see it in a state of the art, like gigantic theater. It's my local one is, it's not bad, but it's far from the best. And even there, I was still able to appreciate a lot of the like beautiful shots and scenes in this movie. And I think that the colors help because Spider-Man it's a very like upbeat, very vibrant, very colorful like character, lots of reds, blues, and yeah, it just looks amazing. So to sum up, Spider-Man Brand New Day is a lot of fun. It's not perfect. It does have its issues, which I've mentioned, but I would recommend going out to see it, especially if you liked the previous Tom Holland movies. You will like this one. If you didn't, there maybe things like the Punisher might pull you in, the Hulk fight might, but at its core, if you didn't like the previous Tom Holland ones, this one probably won't pull you in. You probably won't click with it. But who knows? Maybe still go check it out, or maybe just wait for streaming. Either way, I had a great time with it, and I look forward to seeing what they do with future Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, and eventually what they do in regards to bringing in Miles Morales, which is something that Tom Holland has expressed interest in doing in the future, and I look forward to that. But for now, thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, hit those like and subscribe buttons, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.